that there's a crew in town. The head hillbillies are making their rounds. Small town whispers loud and clear. The sheriff shot the judge in his chambers chair.
Sheriff got a secret he won't keep. Judge shot dead in his disbelief. A lot of people have some stories to tell. Dark pass away, get the sound of a shotgun shell.
All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground. Rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Neighbors hide behind their blinds. Whisper tales of troubled minds. Skeletons covering the mountainside. A treacherous reality in the pines.
Winter reveals the hidden lies. Moonlight couldn't mask their cries. Shadows caught in sunlit skies. There's no cover, no disguise. All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground. Rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Winter reveals the hidden lie. Moonlight could mask their cries. Shadows caught in sunlit skies. There's no cover, no disguise.
All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground. Rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Hi. There we go. Hi, Zelmy.
Beth,
Hi. Well, welcome to the show, everybody. This is Hillbilly Crime. My name's Elizabeth, and this is Sweet Tater, my little mommy.
howdy.
All
How are
right. If you
you?
we're very good today. How are you, mommy?
I feel much better. I went back to the doctor today and they gave me a shot and some cream for my leg, and I believe it's better already.
Good. Good. I know you've had a whole lot
Can
of
you hear
prayers.
me?
Everybody's been praying for your tick bite. So we're glad that
Yeah.
you're feeling better. We got a
I
whole
would
lot
have
of
thought it was a spider bite, but I got the tick. You know what I'm saying? I got proof.
yeah, you took the little critter with you, didn't you?
I did. I took him with me. I'm going to send him to UK. They have a place where you can send ticks and they analyze them. I mean, you
Good.
know, that's what we do with moonshine. You know, you had to analyze it and see what it was.
Research.
Yeah.
That's right. Well, Miss Marnie gifted 10 Hillbilly Crime memberships. Thank you, Marnie. If you guys get a membership, be sure to thank her. And Kurt Frederick, this song sounds so fine on my new Take Mine 12-string guitar. Buddy, I need you here where I can sing. I need me a guitar player. All right. Let's see. Crystal, that guy on the left gives me the creeps. He does me too, honey. He does me too. We had a visitor. We're going to save it for the end of the show, though. So make sure that you stay to the end of the show, and I'll give you a little update on our local drama, I guess is the best way to say it. But welcome in, everybody. We got Gerald Scott. Good evening. Christy Lou. Thank you, Marnie. Been a lurker for a while. Decided to go legit. Thank you. Well, we are very pleased to have you as a new member. And let's
I had
see.
this cat out. I had this big old tomcat outside.
Yeah.
He was howling, and my dogs went out. So get off my thing. I tell you, these animals are so much trouble.
I know. I've always got a cat jumping on me or clawing on me. But we love our little critters, don't we?
I do. When I get to feeling, tired, really tired, I just go over there and get on that couch, cuddle those little old critters up, and they just love me.
I know.
And my little new girl, she stays in the house, buddy. She don't want to go out and get cold.
She's smart, ain't she?
She is smart.
She's very, very smart. Okay, so let's go ahead and get on over here to this. We're going to watch this. This was a story that came out. Law and Crime is the one who did it, and we're going to watch it for a minute. This is a preacher of a big old mega church. It says the mega church pastor. Let me read what they've got on their site. It says mega church pastor accused of 6 sex acts with child. The former pastor of a Texas megachurch, Robert Preston Morris, has been indicted on a felony child abuse charges. The charges against the 63-year-old stem from allegations of sexual abuse that occurred in the 1980s. And it's got Jesse Weber on here. So let me scoot on over to where...
Is he still a preacher man?
I don't know. We'll have to listen and see what he says here.
Okay.
The history, the accusations, and the potential.
I guess we need to start from the beginning because it's going to play some music here or something.
Evidence. Welcome to Sidebar, presented in North Texas. There is reports that more than 100,000 people attended each weekend. That's according to KSTP ABC 5. And he apparently once had a TV program that aired in over 190 countries, a radio program broadcast in almost 7,000 cities, a now defunct YouTube page that had 8,000 subscribers. And get this, he was on President Donald Trump's spiritual advisory board during his 2016 campaign. This is all per reporting from USA Today. So needless to say, this was a big deal in the religious community. But now he has been indicted in Oklahoma on 5 felony counts, recent acts to a child. Indictment alleges that these acts date back to on or about December 25th, 1982 through January 25th, 1983, and all relate to indictment, who was 13 years old when this happened. And the felonies are described as intentionally looking upon or touching or feeling the body or private parts of this child. Now, Morris turned himself into authorities out in Oklahoma yesterday after a warrant for his arrest was issued. He was reportedly booked into the Osage County Court. The timing of this is key because it was last year when Morris resigned as a pastor after a 80. So it is possible and very likely that we're talking about the same person here. According to WFAA ABC 8, that woman was identified as Cindy Clemishire. And in fact, after the indictment, Clemishire released the following statement. After almost 43 years, the law has finally caught up with Robert Morris for the horrific crimes he committed against me as a child. Now it is time for the legal system to hold him accountable. My family and I are deeply grateful to the authorities who have worked tirelessly to make this day possible and remain hopeful that justice will ultimately prevail. I want to bring on right now David Ring, civil trial attorney who is recognized as one of the leading victim advocate lawyers in the nation for his work representing survivors of sexual abuse and assault. David, so good to have you on as we talk about these allegations. So, allegations make up this criminal indictment, and there is ample proof to assert that allegations, let alone allegations from what, over 40 years ago.
Jesse, it happens. Now, it doesn't happen frequently, but it happens when a victim has kind of hit a wall, law enforcement, or trying to get the case, publicly recognized. And so what they do is they, like this victim did, and we can call her Cindy. She's come out and made herself public. But this victim, Cindy, decided, hey, she's going to come forward, go public with the allegations, and see what happens. And we'll get to this, I'm sure. But the very interesting part of this is that when she did that, she was under the belief that there was no way there could be a criminal case because the statute had lapsed. Hey, it worked out for her. She came forward, she made public allegations, and that spurred on some action by the Attorney General in Oklahoma to figure out a way to bring criminal charges.
So you make a ton of good points I want to get into, including the charges, including what you would think is a potential. Let's get into this. Why do you think he surrendered himself? The first thing I thought was, did he, right? The idea that Diddy turned himself into New York authorities, hoping, that maybe he would get bond and he could be on house arrest. Obviously, that was a federal case, very different. But I have to imagine that is why a criminal defendant surrenders themselves, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, he could put up a fight and say, I'm not going to surrender. And then what happens? They come after him in Texas or wherever he's at, and they arrest him there. And then he's extradited to Oklahoma where these charges are pending. And really all it does is he avoids the inevitable for a few weeks or months. And so I think most criminal defense lawyers will tell their client, hey, this is inevitable. Get bond out, and then you can come back to Texas, and then we'll deal with the charges.
By the way, for true crime fans out there, got to call this out. Investigative documentary out on our YouTube right now. The disappearance of baby Lisa Irwin, that has been a mystery for more than a decade. Who took her from her crib in the middle of the night? Could she possibly still be alive? Megyn Kelly is taking you back inside the case in a special new 5-part series, Megyn Kelly Investigates. She interviews baby Lisa's parents, other key players in the case, and through hidden cameras, brings the first ever comments from one of the men at the center of the story. Deep reporting, expert analysis, Megyn Kelly Investigates on the disappearance of baby Lisa. All 5 episodes are available now on the Megyn Kelly Show's YouTube channel and podcast feed, and you can also find out more at megynkelly.com. I want to ask you this. So Oklahoma Attorney General Gentner Drummond issued the following statement after the release of this grand jury indictment. It says, there can be no tolerance for those who sexually prey on children. This case is all the more despicable because the alleged perpetrator was a pastor who exploited his position. The victim in this case has waited far too many years for justice to be done. And with that, as you mentioned, his office indicated that the statute of limitations doesn't apply because Morris was allegedly not residing or inhabiting Oklahoma at any time. David, explain to us how that works.
Jesse, I did a deep dive on this because it's highly unusual for any state to be able to prosecute a crime like this that occurred more than 40 years ago. I mean, let's face it, whatever the statute of limitations, it's not 40 years, okay? And so what they saw that Cindy had come forward, she saw that these allegations had merit to them. They dug deep and they tried to find a way where they could charge Morris. And what they came up with was this archaic criminal statute that's been on the books forever. And what it said was, if you commit a crime in Oklahoma and you flee the state, the statute of limitations is told or paused until such time that you come back into the state of Oklahoma and we can arrest you. And it's truly, this was a law that was enacted back in the days of outlaw cowboys. You think Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid, they'd come in, they'd rob trains, they'd flee the state of Oklahoma, they'd go to Texas or wherever. And that's why this law was put on the books. Well, now in 2025, they're going to use this same law to say that Morris committed the crimes in the 80s, fled the state of Oklahoma, and now that the victim has come forward, they can charge him with these crimes.
And to be clear, that doesn't happen. You don't see that in other states?
No. This is highly, highly unusual. I mean, they dug deep to find this statute, and it's going to be a huge fight. They're going to have a huge legal fight over whether or not this is a fair application of that law.
And by the way, talking numbers here, he says he faces up to 20 years in prison for each of the 5 charges. Your experience, I mean, what are we talking, 100 years in prison? If this goes to trial, he's convicted, you have the same alleged victim, different instances, different, points in time, different dates. Is it that that's what he could be looking up? I mean, essentially the rest of his life in prison? Or would they congregate it together and say, 20 years in total, all runs concurrently together? I know we're getting, far down the road here because we wouldn't necessarily be able to talk about it, but is that fair to say that he could be facing 20 to 100 years in prison?
Well, he is facing, technically he's facing 20 years for each of the 5 counts, but in reality, if he's convicted, I think, most judges, most courts are going to sentence him anywhere from, 5 to 15 years if he's convicted on all 5 counts. He's facing a significant prison time, whether it's 5, 10, 15 years. He's facing some serious punishment.
So let me get into more of the specifics of the accusations, or what we think they were. So if we assume that CC in the indictment is Cindy Clemenshire, then let's try to put that together. So this all started in a blog post on the Wartburg Watch. It was alleged, again, this was last year, that Cindy, at 11 years old, and her family met Mr. Morris at a youth revival back in 1981 when he was 20 years old, a traveling evangelist, married to his wife. But on Christmas night, December 25th, 1982, so this is when she was 12 years old, the Morris family, according to her, came to visit, and in a room, he allegedly told her to close her eyes and then proceeded to touch her breasts and felt under her panties and warned her never to tell anyone because, quote, it will ruin everything, and that he repeated this alleged abuse until 1987 in Texas and Oklahoma. And there's even a claim that he tried to have sex with her when she was 16 years old. And she claimed both families knew what was going on, that she sought counseling at one point. And then in 2005, according to her, she tried to file a lawsuit, but Morris's attorney replied that it was her fault for being, quote, flirtatious. She apparently asks for $50,000, came back with $25,000 if she signed an NDA, but she refused. Again, this is all on that blog post. Now, Cindy apparently told USA Today about what she came forward and why she came forward now, saying, I've always just trusted that God's timing would take it wherever it needed to go. Why hide? Now, David, this is her account. Assuming the statute of limitations is resolved in the prosecution's favor and this case can proceed, this is still a very old case. Do you think that there are challenges for prosecutors in proving all this? Are there issues with her as a key witness? Talk to me about what you think there.
It would have been, but there's one critical fact that took place that changed everything. And that's when Cindy came forward in 2024 and said, hey, this happened to me when I was 12, 13, 14 years old. The Morris, the perpetrator, issued a statement in which he admitted to it. You
want me to get more specific? Would you like me to lay out what he said? Let me lay this out.
Yeah.
So he apparently tells the Christian Post, and I was going to get to this later, but I'm glad you brought it up now. He tells the Christian Post, when I was in my early 20s, I was involved in inappropriate sexual behavior with a young lady in a home where I was staying. It was kissing and petting and not intercourse, but it was wrong. This behavior happened on several occasions over the next few years. In March of 1987, the situation was brought to light, and it was confessed and repented of. I submitted myself to the elders of Shady Grove Church and the young lady's father. They asked me to step out of ministry and receive counseling and freedom ministry, which I did. Since that time, I've walked in purity and accountability in this area. And he explained that he ultimately returned to the church in 1989, allegedly had the blessing of the female's father and the elders of the ministry, even claiming that he met with the female and her family, adding, "I asked their forgiveness and they graciously forgave me." And according to CBS, he also allegedly admitted during a sermon in 2014 that he was, quote, sexually immoral. And we'll talk a little bit more about Gateway Church in a second, but David, again, going back to that, but it is interesting he never mentioned age.
He refers to her as a young lady when she was 12 when it started. So, he's still not coming to grips with what he did, which was sexual abuse. He's trying to portray this as, oh, gee, I cheated on my wife and I had an affair and it was wrong. But his admission absolutely comes back to haunt him. And I think truly that's why the Oklahoma Attorney General figured out a way to bring these charges against him, because they had his admission. Like you said, very, very difficult case if it's just he said, she said with nothing else going back 40 years. Really difficult case. But when he comes out and
why would he admit it?
I think he admitted it. I don't know for sure. I think he got bad advice and they said, hey, there's no way they can bring criminal charges against you at this time. So why don't you, do the right thing and say something happened and move on and put and this whole thing will die a slow death. And I think once he did that, the Oklahoma Attorney General said, oh my God, he just admitted it. How do we charge this guy? We have his admission.
Now I'm sure his lawyers will say it's not an admission, that everybody's looking at it the wrong way, and that this is alleged admission, is alleged confession, not quite what they're saying. They might be saying it provides different context, but we'll see that point. I wanted to ask you about Gateway Church. So this is interesting because Gateway Church released the following statement to CBS News Texas. We are aware of the actions being taken by the legal authorities in Oklahoma and are grateful for the work of the justice system in holding abusers accountable for their actions. We continue to pray for Cindy Clemishire and her family, for the members and staff of Gateway Church, and for all of those impacted by this terrible situation. Now, as I mentioned, when she went public with those allegations against Morris last year, again, he comes forward and makes this statement to the Christian Post, which we've been talking about. But there was fallout last year. So here's the thing. Gateway Church elders, they acknowledged that Morris had confessed to having an affair, but not that he abused a minor. And people ended up protesting outside the church. And originally, the church said in a statement on WFAA TV that Morris, quote, had been open and forthright about a moral failure he had over 35 years ago. And, quote, there have been no other moral failures. Later on, after his resignation, the elders released a statement. Quote, we regret that we did not have the information that we now have. For the sake of the victim, we are thankful this situation has been exposed. We know many have been affected by this. We understand that you are hurting, and we are very sorry. It is our prayer that in time, healing for all those affected can occur. Now, according to USA Today, a law firm then conducts an independent investigation into the allegations, in which they reportedly collected almost 800 gigabytes of data, reviewed thousands of pages of documents, conducted numerous interviews, and in the end, the church removed several elders. And Morris's own son and daughter-in-law and executive pastor, they stepped down. And then you have Elder Tra Wilbanks tell the congregation during a live stream service that there were another group that had information, but essentially turned a blind eye. And he added, what happened to Cindy Clemishire was heartbreaking and vile. We denounce sexual abuse in all of its forms, and we feel deep sorrow for those who have been victimized by such despicable actions. As an elder, I did not know the truth, and frankly, like many of you, my wife and I are shocked, devastated, and grieving. I'd like to express my personal compassion for Cindy Clemishire. I can't imagine carrying a burden like that for so many years. And I want to say to you, Cindy, I'm so sorry. And according to Wilbanks, the investigation by this law firm didn't result in any further allegations against Morris, but you can see the fault. Now, David, I'm made of questions here. First of all, is it standard for an outside law firm to do an investigation like this?
It is, because if this church wants to have any credibility at all, and believe me, their conduct going back in time is despicable. And so the new leaders of the church realized, hey, we covered it up in the past. No matter what we say in 2025, no one's going to believe us. We need to get to the bottom of this. And what entities do, religious and otherwise, they'll hire an outside law firm to conduct a full-scale investigation where everyone has to cooperate. And now a lot of times they'll keep those findings to themselves. They'll keep it quiet. They won't announce it publicly. In this case, the church said, we're gonna kind of announce what came of this, and that there was fallout and people were fired and disciplined as a result. I mean, good for them for doing that. Should have done it a long time ago.
What do you make of the departures?
I think this is, look, Jesse, this has been going on for decades, and we hoped it would have come to an end. Religious entities covering up the sexual crimes of their leaders, of pastors, of youth leaders, of people like Robert Morris. They knew in 1989 that he did this. They did nothing. They put him on a sabbatical for 2 years and then brought him back. They knew in 2005 he did this to a minor, and they kind of shrugged it off. And the lawsuit, they said, oh, if we're going to settle the case, it's got to be an NDA. But they were aware of those negotiations, and they did nothing. So finally now, when it all comes out and they have nowhere to go and they're backed into a corner, okay, now they finally come clean. So it's sad that this still goes on.
And just to be clear, from a legal point of view, these are allegations. He hasn't been convicted, and I'm sure he'll put on a defense. But I am curious about this. When you hear about what Wilbank said, that there's these two groups of individuals, some who knew, some who turned the other way, you see the resignations. Could anyone else face criminal charges?
Potentially, yes. But again, because we're talking about a crime that took place a while ago, it might be difficult. But just generally speaking, there are people that are called, child care custodians, just basically people who come into contact with children. If they learn of a crime against a child, almost every state has a law where they're mandated by the law to report it to the authorities. And so if someone, an elder in the church, came across this information and learned that he had molested a girl, that they were required to report it to the authorities so the police can investigate. Now, look, there's a lot of complexity to that law. I'm not saying it absolutely applies to these facts here, but just generally speaking, yeah, possibly others could be criminally charged for not reporting it or not doing anything, and they definitely could be sued for not doing anything. That's just straight out negligence.
By the way, I wanted your perspective on this because I'm not really sure what this means. So it's been reported that this elder, Mr. Wilbanks, also indicated that Robert Morris made, quote, financial demands after this law firm probe, this law firm investigation, and that apparently led to litigation between him and the church. What does that mean, he made financial demands, if that's true?
That's interesting. At that point, he resigned, likely forced to resign, and he probably felt like he didn't deserve to go away, and probably made a demand like that he wanted, compensation and benefits and whatever it might be to go along with that resignation. That's my best guess.
In the last few years, people are looking at it a little differently, which brings me to one final point. The church apparently settled multiple lawsuits, actually really 2 lawsuits, before the accusations came out about Mr. Morris. So according to CBS, one case involved allegations that several church pastors covered up the alleged sexual abuse of a minor by a member of the congregation in March of 2018, including by not informing police. And then they apparently settled another lawsuit filed by an employee who claimed She was the victim of discrimination and sexual harassment by one of the church pastors who allegedly told her, quote, God gave her cancer to teach her a lesson. Now, David, unrelated to the Robert Morris case per se, what does this tell you in the larger story?
It tells you that this church has some serious, serious issues. I mean, you just look at the Robert Morris situation. You're like, how in the world does that happen? That is an absolute cover up by this church. And then the other two incidents or lawsuits that you just mentioned, and you just shake your head and said, what in the world is going on over there? But like you said, Jesse, there's going to be a spotlight that's going to be shined on this church, and we're going to see, how they tried to bury all these things and how they handled these very serious situations. And I guess they're going to have their day of reckoning as well.
One more point. Because the charges seem to only be related to one alleged victim, and because the law firm conducted this, what appears to be a very thorough investigation, does it seem to you that it's unlikely that there are additional charges for Mr. Morris with respect to other potential alleged victims? I mean, if that would have come out, it would have come out by now, right?
You would think so. I mean, here's what's interesting is that in my experience, most perpetrators don't just have one victim, right? They have multiple victims, especially if we're looking at a 40-year time span. But this case has gotten a lot of publicity over the last few years, especially when Cindy came forward a year or two ago. And you would think that if there were other victims out there, they would likely have come forward by now, particularly when the law firm is doing a very in-depth on and talk to witnesses and potential victims. So it is unusual that there are no other victims, and maybe there aren't. Maybe Morris, did this one time and swore he would never do it again and didn't. It's highly unusual, but it happens.
David Ring.
I don't think that what that man said was accurate. I think if people do stuff like this, then they don't just do it once. What do you think, Mommy?
Well, that's what he said, that it was highly unlikely. But, the people that victims that he may have had may not want to come forward because it's so far in the past. You know what I'm saying? Now, if there was some money involved, if this woman should happen to get some money, you'll have more people come forward, I think.
Yeah. Well, we've seen just like here, people don't come forward because they get harassed if they do speak out, threatened if they speak out, and the sentence, the punishment, like we kind of, the basis of the justice system is that the punishment fit the crime, right?
Well, it depends. They may not encourage people to speak out either, because the church and the religion is more important than the rights of some women. You know what I'm talking about? So they're more focused on the establishment than they are individuals.
Nene Brown says Ring doorbell cam needs to invent an underwear cam. All right, now this one here, this guy, he's a cop, and he refers to himself as Officer Sexy, and he is facing some shocking charges. It says this one too is from Law and Crime, and it says a New Hampshire police officer who bragged about being dubbed Officer Sexy in his Seabrook community is now facing shocking child P charges. Officer John Giarrusso III is accused of several disturbing claims, including uploading graphic images and sending explicit text messages about sex abuse with young children. And I always try and put the links to all of these in the description of my video. So I went ahead and did that before we even started. So if anybody wants to go find them, you can find them there. So let's check this out.
Officer Sexy faces shocking child pornography charges. Court documents lay it all out, disturbing details of an alleged betrayal of duty. The cop allegedly sent disturbing messages about his desire to abuse underage girls, some as young as a baby. And it gets worse. Investigators say Officer John Giarrusso even helped raise money for organizations that help abused children heal, but now he's the one accused of exploiting them. I'll walk you through the details. For Law and Crime News, I'm Kennedy Walker. This is Officer John Giarrusso's mugshot. It's in black and white. As an officer, he's not used to being on this side of the lens, but now his badge is at risk of being gone, and the accusations against him are as dark as the image itself. It all started with a tip from the National Center for Exploited Children, and it led police to a social media account believed to be Giarrusso's. According to court documents obtained by Law and Crime, that account showed conversation and allegedly revealing Giarrusso's no one could have imagined given his badge. Investigators say Giarrusso's name, date of birth, and IP address were linked to an account on the social media platform Kick. And that account uploaded 5 videos that show children, some as young as 6 years old, being molested and raped by adults. Court documents allege selfies uploaded to the app additionally verified Giarrusso's identity. The complaint also says the Seabrook officer engaged in graphic conversation with other Kick users about having sex with their young daughters, stepdaughters, and wives. According to the complaint, Giarrusso used the user WTF201020_ETK. And from that account, police accuse him of sending several messages discussing daddy-daughter role play and saying at one point, quote, "My fantasy is a threesome with a mother and daughter." In another graphic and sexually explicit conversation, the username asks several graphic questions regarding a user's 12-year-old stepdaughter. The following is an excerpt from the conversation, but I must warn you, it is graphic. Username WTF201020_ETK, who police say they've confirmed daughter in a picture and says, quote, "Don't worry, I don't share, not a just a pervert." The conversations continued for several messages. The username said that he needed to have sex with the other user's 12-year-old stepdaughter and continued with vulgar and graphic comments. He was also accused of bragging to other Kick users who said they were underage about being a police officer and says the girls in town called his time on the force. Giarrusso raised money for organizations that helped abused children heal. Now, these allegations paint the horrifying picture that the officer who swore to uphold the law is now accused of preying on the most vulnerable. Giarrusso is charged with felony counts of possession of child pornography, as well as distributing material of a child in the nude and disseminating obscene matter to a minor. Giarrusso pleaded not guilty. The department has put him on leave. They released this statement saying that, quote, "While the Seabrook Police Department adheres to the principle that those accused of crimes are innocent until proven guilty, given the nature of the accused crimes, the department immediately placed Officer Giarrusso on administrative leave." They go on to say, quote, "Allegations of criminal conduct against a law enforcement officer are taken seriously and will be dealt with swiftly and appropriately." And joining me to talk more about this is legal expert Tyler Bailey. Tyler, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's just dive right in. This is a crazy story. A Hampshire police officer is charged with felony counts of possession of child pornography, as well as distributing material of a child in the nude and disseminating obscene matter to a minor. If convicted, how many years is he potentially facing?
Well, being a law enforcement officer and him knowing better, if convicted, I'm pretty sure the judge who would be presiding and sentencing him would give him the max on this penalty. Law enforcement officers, they have a high standard, and jury on sentencing, so there'll be no leeway for him here. And if he's convicted, he'll likely get the harshest penalty the judge could give.
What are the chances of this case going to trial, or is a plea deal more likely in a case with such serious allegations?
Well, if everything adds up, if all the evidence links up, I don't think there's a good chance of a plea deal, because the plea offer would probably be the max. Because the prosecutors would like an example of a law enforcement officer. So I'm pretty sure the prosecution here, if they're offering a plea, it may be something like 1 year off, and with stakes so high, the defense probably has no choice but to try it. And so I don't think there's a good chance of there being a plea deal offered.
Do you think they can try it without having those, potential victims or witnesses? I'm not sure the prosecution is going to bring forward, but are they able to try this case without those young alleged victims?
One, they'll probably be able to get the parents to cooperate. Two, task force that most of the general public does not know about, that's out there to look for people who are predators, who are preying on young children. There's internet task force to protect minors. A lot of times the social media outlets, messaging companies, and internet providers, they also cooperate with the government to turn over those obscene materials. So likely there's a big digital footprint here, and the parents more than likely would cooperate if there are images of their children as young as 5, 7, 6 years old floating around the internet. I'm pretty sure it won't be hard to get people to cooperate.
Given the nature of his job as a police officer, how does this affect his sentencing compared to an ordinary citizen?
I think that, unfortunately, it's definitely going to affect his sentencing on the harsher end of this, because, there's a high burden or standard that's set for people who put themselves out there to protect and serve. Whether you're a public official, whether you're a law enforcement officer, you know better. And here, wearing the brass, having that oath that he took, having access to different resources, all this is going to affect him as a law enforcement officer. And I'm pretty sure he knows that this is not going to turn out well for him. I hate that this person who was preying on these children probably had some deep-rooted issues himself. That's the only thing that may be able to save him with some mitigation, if he could, maybe articulate that well through his defense to the court in sentencing or any plea.
Do you think something like that could work if hypothetically he does say, it's...
I don't think mental illness will be the route that will work, because he obviously was competent enough to have a badge and have a service weapon and put on a uniform every day. But maybe the only thing I could see that could be used for mitigation is maybe he was also abused or had some other trauma that he suffered that caused him to struggle with this. And that may be something that the court may consider in some sort of sentencing, but nothing regarding mental illness will help him, because he was obviously had the requisite
an app to share these materials. Does that complicate the case legally, and how might the defense respond to this?
Well, there's a lot of apps out there that sometimes are encrypt messages, or they will delete after they're sent. But again, they're not being used to facilitate child pornography. It could complicate things if they're not able to track this information, but sounds like they already have it. And that's what I was saying earlier about these internet task force and these digital providers who let's say your Signal or one of the other providers do cooperate with the government to make sure they're not facilitating child pornography. So although it could be more complicated, I doubt it is, because they already have a warrant for his arrest. He's been arrested and probably have a good digital footprint to try him here.
Is there any chance that the charges could be reduced or dropped based on a legal loophole or technicality?
There's always a chance of something like that. A legal loophole or technicality. Mainly there could be some technicality in make sure all evidence gets in. You are still dealing with highly complicated. It has to be done well. There needs to be a chain of custody. That makes a case like this a little harder to try, just based off the procedural aspect of it. So if something, for example, and the person who would have to say this is legit evidence that came through our provider would probably be somebody from, the Silicon Valley area, or someone who works for these internet providers, who has to come to court and corroborate that evidence. Although that, it could result in it being reduced because of just the challenge of getting the evidence in.
The investigation reportedly included surveillance and digital forensics. How strong is the evidence against him, and what could his defense team challenge?
Well, it sounds like the evidence is pretty strong, because one thing that stood out to me is there was a task force that was already assigned to this. It doesn't sound like it was a one-off thing. It sounds like they may have been watching him and collecting evidence. In a situation, usually they wait till they have even bring charges with the task force to protect vulnerable children. So I think like there's one message that was found on way and then turned over to law enforcement. It sounds like there was a specific task force that was out there and is making a case, and now they're ready to present it to a jury.
What could the defense team argue, though? The surveillance, through an app they use.
Meaning, if they initially got their warrant to start collecting this data and digital evidence by something that was not sufficient probable cause, that could result in all the evidence being thrown out. But a case like this, as a defense lawyer, what you want to do is you want to try to attack each and every piece of evidence. They may show you a photograph, text message received. Was it done properly? Was there a sufficient warrant for it? Was there probable cause for the warrant? So you have to attack every piece of evidence. And let's say there's 10 photos out there that are saying, if you can keep out 4, 5, or even 3, that's defense case a little stronger and maybe leverage in getting a more favorable plea deal.
What impact does this case have on the public perception of police officers and their ability to be held accountable for criminal behavior?
Well, there's always bad law enforcement officer who's exchanging conversations about having sex with children. Nobody wants anybody like that in their department. So I'm pretty sure his fellow colleagues, and it does hurt them because they're out there putting themselves out there to protect and serve, and then you got somebody out there who he's allegedly a creep, right? Preying on children. It hurts them because they want to have good reputations. They want people to trust enforcement and not think that some badge is using it for improper reasons.
Given investigation, could more victims or details surface that could impact the case, and how could that change the charges?
There could be a whole lot more that we don't even know about now. And so anytime you're dealing with protecting children, it's really important that prosecutors look to make sure that all victims have a role in the prosecution case. Sometimes what you have is they'll look at the stronger cases and they'll say, okay, we'll just move forward with these. And there could be 5 or 6 more. But it's really important when you're trying to make sure that it's sending a message for the victims to make sure they all have a chance to have their voice heard. And so when you're dealing with internet crimes, children, and somebody who clearly has been preying on them, there's a likelihood there's more evidence that could be found as they further look into the matter.
When police officers get arrested, is there a chance that their past work gets questioned? Like, for example, if he testified, attorneys be able to dig that up and possibly throw out the past things that he was a part of, or just no, not really?
Well, definitely they can, because most of the time law enforcement officers, they have other cases that they're actively working on. So he may have actively made, let's say, 15 arrests in the past year or two, and let's say those cases have not gone to trial, the prosecution case is tanked when your star witness is now known as a child sexual offender. No jury is going to believe that person on the stand. So immediately, as a defense lawyer, you look at your cases where he's your officer, and you start talking to the prosecution about dismissing the case, or the bare minimum giving a very favorable plea deal, because it's going to be hard for the state to present a case when their lead star witness, the arresting officer, is currently facing charges for a child sex-related crime. And then you have to look at what other cases that he has prosecuted in the past, especially cases with similar facts. It makes you call those into question. It could be some leverage that could be used in the appeal process. It won't immediately be thrown out, but there's something that can be looked into, and maybe with a different level of scrutiny.
How does this typically impact the case?
He should have been. Well, he's innocent till proven guilty. So allegedly, he's accused of doing this to terminate person with allegations this heinous. Being on leave is not the right message. His bond was only $100,000. I think that was way too low for a law enforcement officer dealing with these type of allegations. And being on administrative leave is something they have their own appeal process to make in-house for law enforcement officers. Technically, employee is terminated before this case goes to trial.
Can you explain just what administrative leave means? Because I know that's usually a big question when they say, oh, they've been placed on leave. Like, are they still getting paid?
On leave without pay, or they can be placed on leave with pay. If you just hear they're on administrative leave, that means they're still being paid, they still have access to their benefits. And so he does have a family, so his wife, his children still have access to the health insurance that they would have under the law enforcement agency that he serves with. If he was terminated outright, that means, of course, you lose all your benefits. You're not employed anymore. But be on administrative leave with pay means that you're employed. You just can't do any work, essentially.
Now, could the defense argue mistaken identity or claim someone else was behind these actions potentially?
They can, and likely, when people are involved in obscene internet activity, they usually use different screen handles and profile pictures and things like that. They could try to use that, but today's digital footprint, it's so easy to track down people because you have location that's being shared from your phone a lot of times. So even if he says it wasn't him, they could probably place him in the same proximity of where this internet exchange of messages, the photographs was. So even if you can, hard for the defense to overcome.
Correct. And in the criminal complaint, I did read that they believe that it is the officer based on his IP address that's linked to his address and things of that nature. But still, everything is alleged. If the officer cooperates with authorities and helps identify other potentially alleged abusers, could that lead to a reduction in charges or sentencing?
It could lead to a reduction in charges. They can say that he's cooperated with the department, so they're asking that the judge either give a less severe penalty in any sentencing. But I don't see it resulting in the charges being completely dropped. The fact that he will cooperate now is different. I mean, he already took an oath of protective service, so he should have been arresting these people initially. Now, when officers get caught up in cases like this, offense that they were acting truthfully undercover for some sort of deep undercover operation that the department didn't even know about. That's usually the only good defense that a police officer saying, I was actually deep undercover with another unit that it was so bad that my agency didn't even know about it. It can play sometimes. The charge is being dismissed. The defense needs to be thinking of a big theme they could use to try to hopefully on their set aside get the thing dismissed or resulting in a acquittal rather than conviction.
Is it possible that the defense team or cop was coerced or manipulated into these actions?
I don't know if you can show that he's been coerced or manipulated unless there's been somebody who was forcing him to do it for some other reason. Let's say he was part of but I can't see manipulated unless he was thought he was talking to an adult and not a child. But the thing that stood out to me are the photographs. So you can't mistake a 70-year-old with a grown person.
And lastly, if he is convicted, could he potentially be eligible for parole?
He could be eligible for parole with charges like this. Usually the only cases where people aren't eligible for parole are heinous ones such as murder, where you have life without parole. But any other case, generally, there will be eligibility for parole after at least 80 to 85% of the sentence is served.
Okay. All right. Let's see. I'm going to stop sharing that and I'll reshare this other one. We've got one more to look at. Let me take your mute off, Mom. What do you think about that one? My gosh, it's like they just keep coming out of the woodwork. You know, they're behind the closed doors.
We got a lot of people in this country, and there's a lot of focus and emphasis on sex and sexuality. And, you know, I watch PBS movies because it doesn't have all that, you know, it just doesn't have all that stuff in it that we have in our movies. So,
go ahead.
And so I wonder about other countries that are, you know, of course, we got so many more people than, say, Britain or whatever the British Isles would be, or France or somebody like that. We got a lot more people, but you could present it and you could get a comparison. I just don't think other countries have policemen and those kinds of people that are and spiritual leaders. I call them spiritual leaders. I just don't think they have them that are sexually abusing children. I don't know what's wrong with our culture that we somehow are promoting this within our country.
Well, we make too many excuses for it, and there's not enough punishment.
Well, I think it goes deeper than that. I think that might be. I think there's something wrong with us as a society. Is what I'm saying.
Well, I agree.
I think we're too focused on sexuality. Well, I know that preachers have been naughty boys for a long time, and if they have women in their church that go and talk to them, and you know the women are upset and feeling left. Honey, they victimize them too. I mean, I know they do because I've known them that have done it. Now, I'm not saying they all do. And, you know, look how many people in the church will cop a feel. You know what I'm saying?
It happened to me. We were up at the front of our church in prayer group. We were laying hands on somebody, praying for somebody. And an old man walked up and pressed himself up against my backside, and I just froze. I froze completely because you can feel their things under their clothes. You know, I knew exactly what it was as soon as I felt it, and I just froze. I didn't know what to do. We were in church.
Well, I know that's just what I'm saying, that some of these organizations are licensed to do that kind of behavior. Now, I don't know if they have that kind of behavior in mind or they just have the opportunity to do it. But any police officer that is known as sexy, I'd have to cast a little eye on him and see what he was carrying on about. You know what I'm saying? But we have to, you know, you remember that the popes and those people, that church, I don't know if it happened in other countries, but this country was riddled with that. And people didn't even want to bring that out because of the faith. They would rather see people victimized.
Yep. Same way here.
Take those people to court.
Yeah,
Well, I'm
they
saying that was in the US of A.
Well, it's been other places too. The Catholic Church really had a bad problem with it, and I think there's a lot more eyes on it now since they had that big blow up. I don't know, was it in the 2000s maybe when it
No,
came?
it was way before then. You can watch videos of like in New Jersey and places like that, of those policemen. They just didn't know what to do. They were Catholics themselves, you know. So
Yeah,
you're faced with that within the law enforcement too. They don't
yeah.
want that eye cast on them. And it's
Well, and one of the things that I've learned since researching so much is that with a lot of these police departments, once an internal investigation is started on somebody, most of the time they can just resign. And if they resign, it stops the investigation in its tracks, and they're allowed to go on and go
get a
get
job
hired
someplace else.
go get a job at another police department, and whatever investigation was started on them does not follow them.
Well,
So
the departments themselves would rather they resign than to
mhm,
do the investigation because they don't want what they're doing come under scrutiny. And there may be other things that are going on that nobody knows about that may not even be of that nature of a crime. You know what I'm saying? They don't want the eye cast on them.
well, it's kind of like, with that lawyer down, I don't know if you were aware of that case or not, the big Murdaugh case in South Carolina. He was an attorney. He was a high dollar attorney, and his son had a boat wreck, and
Yeah, I remember that. That was pretty sad. But
the
I think
boat
they
wreck.
got him, didn't they?
They did. But what I'm saying is that boat wreck, he covered it all up until that boat wreck happened and it unalived a little girl that was on it with his son. And that boat wreck, it was like the
Turning point.
well, you pull on a thread and what happens? Everything just kind of unravels and people start panicking. Well, he panicked, and what did he end up doing? He ended up unaliving his own son and his own wife to try and cover it up, to try and cover up the
Yeah.
things that he had, the rules and the laws that he had broken all these years. He had gotten away with it, but now everybody's going to start come looking into this investigation, and it's going to open up that big can of
Well, that
worms.
sure takes a mighty cold person to be able to do that.
It sure does. But I think it's a larger conversation that we have to have about, people wear a mask most of the time, and they're able to keep that mask on but only for so long. They can only hide their true
Well,
color.
until a big event occurs.
And they start panicking, and they start getting nervous, and that mask will start slipping, and you start seeing cracks in that little facade that they've put up to pretend who they are. Now we've got one more, and it's funny that you should say that because this guy is his name. It's another law and crime interview, it's not an interview, but it's a story, and it's about Russell Brand. Now, he was a comedian, or he is a comedian from over there, and he has been very well known for being just he's real nasty talking. He's been very outspoken about being a schmeck's addict, and he was an alcoholic, and he struggled with drugs. And I know that we all grow up like most of us who get into recovery. We end up growing up and wising up later on. But we still have to be held accountable for what we did in our alcohol and rug days, and I think he's getting he's getting in trouble over some stuff. So let's watch and see what's going on with him.
Is now an accused rapist. The star charged by UK police with rape and sexual assault, and he's not staying quiet.
I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist.
His response to the criminal charges and the allegations being made by 4 separate women, according to police. We'll dive into what we know and what he has to say about it. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. And he has faced accusations of sexual misconduct in the British media for years. Now he is going to face them in court. These are the charges the 50-year-old performer is facing, according to Metropolitan Police in the United Kingdom. 1 count of rape, 1 count of indecent assault, 1 count of oral rape, and 2 counts of sexual assault. Police say these charges are related to events that happened between 1999 and 2005. We'll get into what we know about these accusations in just a moment, but first let's break down what we know about Russell Brand. He rose to fame in the early 2000s in the UK as a comedian, then went on to host TV shows and work for MTV. Eventually, his popularity landed him roles in some big movies in the United States. You might remember Forgetting Sarah Marshall. That was in 2008. It was a huge success. It grossed more than $63 million at US box offices. In 2010, he was in another hit movie, Get Him to the Greek. It's another comedy. His co-host in that film, Sean Diddy Combs, which, given today's news and Diddy's legal troubles, that movie certainly has people talking. Brand also famously married singer Katy Perry in 2010. They divorced in late 2011 when Brand reportedly sent Perry a text message telling her he wanted to end their marriage. And that was just before she was set to go out and perform in front of a large crowd. Over the years, Brand has spoke out about his faith and his politics, but his positions on those issues have changed. In 2012, he once appeared with the Dalai Lama. Over the pandemic, Brand's politics turned more anti-vaccine, and he's now a vocal supporter of President Trump. In 2024, he was baptized as a Christian. I bring all of this up not to have some sort of political discussion, but because it will make sense when you hear his response to the allegations that police have leveled this week. Let's talk about those allegations and the charges that Brand is now facing. The Metro Police say these charges are a result of an investigation that started in September 2023. Police say they received a number of allegations against Brand in the wake of reporting by UK media outlets Channel 4 and the Sunday Times, who aired allegations of sexual abuse against Brand from a number of accusers in the documentary. The charges that we're talking about today, according to police, are from an incident in 1999 when a woman was allegedly raped in the south of England, in 2001 when a woman was allegedly indecently assaulted in London, in 2004 when a woman was allegedly orally raped and sexually assaulted in London, and between 2004 and 2005, when a woman was allegedly sexually assaulted once again in London, and police say these are incidents from 4 separate women. The lead investigator in the case from the Metro Police wrote, quote, "The women who have made reports continue to receive support from specially trained officers. The Met's investigation remains open, and detectives ask anyone who has been affected by this case or anyone who has information to come forward and speak with police." Now, as for Brand, he was quick to respond on his social media channels.
Hello. Firstly, thank you for these incredible and overwhelming messages of support. We're very fortunate in a way to live in a time where there's so little trust in the British government. We're very fortunate, I suppose, that this is happening at a time where we know that the law has become a kind of weapon to be used against people, institutions, and sometimes entire nations that will not accept and tolerate levels of corruption that are unprecedented. I'm speaking particularly to those of you that are watching this in the UK. How do you feel about your legal system right now? How do you feel about some of the high-profile cases that are not being pursued and prosecuted? How do you feel that the Southport murders were handled? How do you feel about the government of Keir Starmer? Now, that's just sort of general context. Me, I've always told you guys that when I was young and single, before I had my wife and family, who were just about a shot over there, my beautiful children, I was a fool, man. I was a fool before I lived in the light of the Lord. I was a drug addict, a sex addict, and an imbecile. But what I never was a rapist. I've never engaged in non-consensual activity. I pray that you can see that by looking in my eyes. I want to thank all of you for your continuing support. I want to let you know that our show will be on Rumble on Monday. Thanks for your support there. And of course, I'm now going to have the opportunity to defend these charges in court, and I'm incredibly grateful for that. In the meantime, you lot, stay free, and we will be continuing to discuss this matter. Praise the Lord.
So you hear Brand leading with what he's known for now as someone who's very much into his politics, very much into his faith, before he gets to the allegations and the charges to which he says he denies. You also heard him talking about his children. Seemed like he was on vacation somewhere. After he divorced Katy Perry, he married an author named Laura Gallagher, who now goes by Laura Brand. They got married in 2017, and they have 3 kids together. As far as where this case is expected to go next in the legal system, police say Russell Brand is set to appear in court on May 2nd. Joining us now from London is criminal solicitor Nick Brett. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today as this news has come down about Russell Brand. What do you make of these charges he's now facing?
Well, he's been under investigation for some time, and the Crown Prosecution Service have now made a decision to charge him with 1 count of rape, 1 count of oral rape, 1 sexual assault, or 2 sexual assaults actually, with 4 different women. So this is an investigation that really started as a result of a program called Dispatches that was aired about 3 years ago, detailing allegations that have been made during the time when Russell Brand was really quite a popular broadcaster in the United Kingdom in the sort of early to mid 2000s. And so I think people have been aware about the prospect of him being charged with offences for some time.
Yeah, it's fascinating because in these charges, it's related. One is for a case reportedly in 1999, and then 2001, 2004, and then between 2004 and 2005. And then there's allegations that go all the way, I think, to 2013. And I think about Russell Brand's career, and you had in the United States, Forgetting Sarah Marshall was a really popular movie in 2008. Of course, he was married to Katy Perry for a period of time, which would be after when these reportedly happened. The dates of these, and to go back to say a case that apparently happened in 2001 in UK court, how is that viewed when it comes to, I think in the United States, like a statute of limitations type issue? Is that something that happens in UK court?
We don't have a statute of limitations for criminal allegations unless they are very minor allegations. So what are called summary offences have to be tried within 6 months. There's no time limit in respect of any other offence. In fact, it's really quite commonplace for sexual offences in particular to be tried many, many years after the event. I mean, sometimes with with offences, for example, involving child abuse that took place 40, 50 years ago, those allegations can be tried before a Crown Court. So it's really quite commonplace. The Russell Brand investigation, is part of a, I suppose, pattern of investigations that have been brought about in more recent times because the alleged victims of this kind of offending have been, slightly more emboldened to come forward, given the support that they've received in the media and from other places in order to make allegations. So it's not really unusual.
What type of evidence would someone need to have to come forward for Russell Brand to be facing criminal charges as opposed to it playing out in the public, the publicity court as those allegations and the programs had brought forward for years against Russell Brand?
Well, I mean, given the age of the allegations, it's quite unlikely that there will be any forensic evidence. So it will be testimony. Usually the victims of sexual offences are video interviewed and they give their accounts, and that is that is evidence. There may, of course, be other evidence in the form of messaging, media messaging of some sort, but given the age of the allegations, it's probably unlikely. So I would imagine, although I don't know, that the allegations against Russell Brand will be based almost purely on the testimony of the 4 complainants.
In your experience, because in the United States, sometimes the he said, she said argument is not enough to get a conviction for prosecutors. But in the UK, with typically how a court can view that, knowing that there's no statute of limitations, how does that typically play out in cases where it is a victim's word against someone who, in this case, is someone, though controversial, a very popular person?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we have quite a low conviction rate here for allegations of rape and sexual assault, and that has been the subject of quite a lot of media commentary and criticism. I think quite unfairly, criticism of prosecutors and the police sometimes. So, I mean, the difficulties that Russell Brand is likely to face are the fact that there's more than one complainant. I suspect that the Crown Prosecution Service will seek to have the matter tried, or have the allegations tried together. So all 4 complainants in front of the same jury. And so, really the impression that that is given to the jury will depend upon the evidence that is given before them, the cross-examination of the complainants, the evidence given by Russell Brand, both in chief and under cross-examination, if he chooses to give evidence. But obviously, it's difficult for me to comment on the sort of strength of the evidence in the case without knowing. I mean, we're not entitled to know much information about the case at this juncture.
Yeah, and at the time of this recording, I mean, we learned about these charges against Russell Brand really in the last hour or so. So we're kind of just picking up information as we go. I think of the fact that many of these dates happened before he was, at least in the United States, a very popular name. It would have happened during a time when, prior to more international fame for him, he was a big name in the UK. I think starting as a stand-up comedian. I know he's done a lot of different things. Was it not until the documentary came forward just in the last couple of years that people heard or started to hear that there were rumblings about allegations like this, which now he's charged?
I think that's right. I think that there have been subsequent allegations that complaints were made to broadcasters about his behaviour, which has featured in press articles and in documentary programmes about this. So, I mean, he was, as you rightly say, an extraordinarily popular comedian and a very, very talented broadcaster, both on radio and television. In the late 1990s, up until throughout the 2000s, really, there was a scandal involving him and Jonathan Ross, which you may or may not recall, in 2008, when they telephoned Andrew Sachs, who's a sort of very popular and much loved actor here in the United Kingdom, and they left a message on live TV on his answer phone, in which reference was made to the fact that Russell Brand had had sex with his granddaughter, and it was a big scandal. And he, I suppose his broadcasting career here in the United Kingdom was quite badly damaged as a result of that. Although I know he went on to have a very successful career in Hollywood.
Yeah, he did. And one movie I think about today, I know I mentioned Forgetting Sarah Marshall, but there's a movie, Get Him to the Greek, where his co-star is Sean Diddy Combs. So people certainly going to be looking at that film a little bit different and looking at the cast of it different, now seeing what Russell Brand is now charged with. What are some of the biggest differences that you would say between U.S. court and how the legal process could look like going on from here, and what he will face in UK court?
I think probably the biggest difference between the criminal proceedings in the US and criminal proceedings in the UK is that once somebody is charged with a criminal offence, and even before they're charged, they have a before they're charged, they have an expectation of privacy, which obviously in this case was particularly difficult given the provenance of the individual and the nature of the way in which the complaints came about and the level of press interest. But once somebody's been charged with an offence, really that's it, and the media aren't able to publish any information about it. Other than what is said in open court, which in the administrative hearings that lead up to trial tends to be, fairly bland. And so probably the outline of the prosecution case even wouldn't become clear until the case is open to trial. I think in the United States, the system is quite different. And I think that there is often quite a lot of publicity, which is generated pre-trial. And people are interviewed live on television and discuss the case in a way that doesn't happen over here. So I think that they're the predominant differences. When it comes to the actual trial process itself, generally speaking, quite similar. The prosecution introduces a case, it sets out its case, it calls its witnesses, so cross-examines, the defence call their witnesses, and then we have, closing speeches, and the jury is sent out to decide.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear you talk about that, because I think of Russell Brand and just the attention in the last hour or so since this news broke about what he's charged with and the conversation. I mean, we're talking about this right now. So moving forward, though, once the proceedings begin, like if you were to turn on the BBC, there would not be the same type of coverage that you might get in the United States if this was a US case.
If you read the reports from the UK press, all you will see actually when you read it is what he's been charged with, and there'll be a brief statement from the police and the Crown Prosecution Service about the fact of the charge and about the fact that nobody ought to say anything about it. We have a quite important protection for the victims of sexual offences in this country, which means that they are entitled to lifelong anonymity if they've made a complaint about a sexual offence. And that is a protection that's taken very, very seriously indeed. And anybody who took any steps in order to breach that anonymity would find themselves in hot water, facing criminal allegations from sales potential, contempt proceedings. So, I mean, whilst there may be speculation, the extent of that speculation may well be much more in depth in the United States. Over here, you will find that there really isn't much published until the trial begins. And the trial process, well, he's appearing at court, I think, in early May. That will be a magistrate's court. He'll be sent up to the Crown Court. He'll appear in the Crown Court in June. I'm sure he'll almost certainly contest the charges, in which case he's probably unlikely to face trial until sometime in 2026. So it's going to be a fairly long process during which there's likely to be a news void really in connection with the case over here.
Yeah, and how likely is it that facing these charges that Russell Brand could be held behind bars ahead of a trial happening?
I think it's unlikely. I mean, it's difficult to properly comment without knowing a little bit more. Sure. I mean, the basis upon which somebody can be remanded in custody in this country pre-trial is if there are serious concerns that they may not attend trial, so they may leave the jurisdiction. B, that there are serious concerns that they may offend or continue to offend if they were not remanded in custody. Or C, that they may interfere with justice. So, I mean, he's quite a prominent figure, on both sides of the Atlantic. And I think that it would be difficult. And also the allegations are old. So I think it would be very difficult for the prosecution to persuade a court that he needed to be remanded in custody, unless he took some step, which I'm sure he wouldn't do, perhaps to try to leave the jurisdiction.
And going back to how effective a he said, she said argument can be for the defense, at least in the United States, from what I've seen in cases involving alleged sexual abuse. I know Russell Brand, to the allegations that he's faced based off of documentaries to that point, has said that many of his sexual encounters, he believes they were consensual. How does that argument And again, I know that we are, there's a lot of stuff we don't know yet about that's going to be brought forward. But generally speaking, when you see cases like this, where there may not be that physical evidence, and then you have a defendant saying, hey, this was consensual, and there's really no way other than that victim's voice to be able to prove it one way or the other, how do juries in the UK typically see that?
Well, I mean, the only defence really to an allegation of this nature, other than that it didn't happen, is that it was consensual, and I suspect that is likely to be his defence in this case. There are many cases that are prosecuted purely on the say-so of the victim. I mean, I can't speak for the strength or otherwise of the evidence in this particular case because I don't know enough about it. But it would rather depend on how that individual comes across in court, how they come across under cross-examination, and likewise how he comes across if he chooses to give evidence, and what is said. And of course, it may well be that the prosecution case will be made out in connection with one or more victims, but not all of them. It may be that he's acquitted of everything. It may be that I mean, it's just very, very difficult to tell and know, isn't it? I mean, whether or not he would allege, for example, there was some kind of collusion between the victims or some form of political campaign to ensure that he is charged. I mean, there are all sorts of potential ramifications at trial, but without knowing more, it's obviously difficult to say specifically.
No, absolutely. I also think of if he was convicted of these charges, I mean, these are very serious charges that he's accused of. What type of time, what type of punishment could Russell Brand be facing if all of this, at least at this point, several charges that he's facing, if those were found to be true and a jury convicts him?
Well, if you're convicted of rape in this country, then a custodial sentence is almost inevitable. The length of that custodial sentence would depend on the nature of the allegations. So, for example, rape cases that are sort of loosely described as date rape, for example, or rape between partners would be viewed less seriously than, for example, what is commonly referred to as stranger rape. So somebody attacked in a park or in an alleyway or something of that nature would be more serious. But custody would be inevitable, and again, if there were convictions for more than one complainant, then that would be an aggravating feature. A judge would have to consider whether or not he imposed what are called consecutive sentences, so sentences that run one after the other, or whether to impose concurrent sentences, which are sentences that run along side by side. And if he imposes concurrent sentences or consecutive sentences, he would need to decide what the total sentence ought to be. So I think, look, again, it's slightly difficult for me to say without knowing more about the case, but certainly it is right to say that if convicted, custody would be inevitable. I couldn't tell you how long he would get.
And I just think of Russell Brand as the celebrity. I would say, at least in the United States, his height of popularity it's been over for a good period of time. I would say once he got divorced from Katy Perry in 2012, you didn't hear as much about Russell Brand anymore. He made some controversial statements in the pandemic. He's made comments about politics in the US, but in terms of being the person he was when, like, Forgetting Sarah Marshall was in the box office, those days feel like they're long gone. What do you feel is the reaction just from the public in the UK? Not as much asking you as an attorney, but just in general, when people hear this news, what's typically the reaction going to be in the UK to hearing that Russell Brand's been charged with this?
I don't think there would be surprise that he's been charged. I mean, I think it's a story that's almost in a way quite an old story, because there was a big, there was this Dispatches documentary which probably aired 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, so quite some time ago, and there was quite a lot of talk at that time as part of a sort of wider discussion, relating to the Me Too movement and prominent male celebrities who have been accused of sexual misconduct. So I think that it's a case that's been deep in the British psyche for some time. I don't think there will be an enormous amount of surprise that criminal charges have been brought. I mean, certainly it's been known for quite some time that Crown Prosecution Service were considering charges.
And it'll be fascinating to see how this case plays out with Russell Brand. He's due in court in May, and we'll see where things go from there. Nick Brett.
There we go. I had muted myself. One thing that I think is a common factor here is the power. Like somebody like Russell Brand, that guy said something really important there. He said, people didn't tell him no. You know, when you've got yes men around you all the time, and it tends to happen the more money and power you have, right? Because they don't want to, if you are financially benefiting them in some way, they don't want to lose their money. They don't want to lose their meal ticket. If you are a power connection, then they don't want to lose their power and their control. They don't want to lose their access as well to that influence and all that. And acceptance, period. You know, everybody wants to be accepted by the cool kids. You know, I did. I ain't gonna lie. I wanted to be accepted by the cool kids. Cool kids just didn't want to accept me. And that's all right. But we have to, you know, we all have to learn those things on our own. What do you think about that feller there, Mom?
Well, he didn't commit stranger rapes.
I don't even know, you know, like.
He said they were all consensual. So there must have been some hanky-panking going on, I'd say, between him and whoever these women were. Now, he may have overstepped the line and pushed them and different things like that. You know what I'm saying? But I think it's going to be hard to prove
26 years.
This case.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah. 26 years is a long time. And, you know, so many things have evolved since then. And you
he's
know,
been in the spotlight, you know, forever. And there were lots of people that wanted to please him and get close to him, for whether they wanted money or whether they wanted this, that, or other. And this has no connection to the things of preachers. To me, this is a totally different situation.
It is.
Preachers and police people taking advantage of children, because he doesn't have any child molestation cases.
No. And, you know, you got to think, too, in the entertainment industry, I don't think that there's probably going to be very many innocent people that are going to be at the 2 a.m. party that they're having, the after party. You know what I mean? There might be some, but I'd say everybody that's there is kind of an insider. But I mean, I could be wrong.
Yeah, you know, they're drinking or whatever. And he probably, you know, used undue pressure on people to do things he wanted them to do.
Oh yeah.
But I don't think he's very cool. I know a lot of people would think he was very, very cool, but I didn't think he was cool at all.
No, I don't think he is either. I don't like that. I mean, I'm a grown up, you know, I'm almost 50 years old. So it's not like I'm a prude, you know, or anything like that. But the exposure, like, this is one of the things that I've said many times with kids, with little kids, when they are exposed to loose sexual behavior,
overt sexual behavior,
when they're exposed to that, yes, in the family. And I know that I've said it 100 times, we're sexual beings. It's a part of life. I understand that. And homes that are married, you know, of course they're going to have their own sex life and stuff. But there's a time and a place for that kind of stuff, you know. I'm not of the opinion that it should be heard, it should be seen, or any kind of anything related to it should be exposed to the kids. But you know, we've all got opinions. Everybody's
Well,
got.
I'm probably an old prude myself.
Well, I
And
just
I
know
don't even
what.
like old dirty movies, you know.
I don't either.
You know, that's like if you watch a film that's got a detective woman in it, right? You remember them women with Farrah Fawcett and whatever that was back then, that they had that where they were detectives. They were those three women. I can't
Charlie's
remember.
Angels.
Yeah. Well, you know, I don't want to watch stuff like that. That's why I watch a lot of PBS, because I can watch a movie about a detective woman, and that's just not there.
Right. I don't like that either. I don't like when I've sat down to watch a movie or something and I've got my kids with me and all of a sudden some big smack scene shows up on the screen. That makes me so uncomfortable and I'll turn it off. I'm not going to sit there. That's something, you know.
Well, my dogs don't care one bit. They just soon watch it. Well, I'm going to bed. You all gonna have to.
Okay. Well, I'm just gonna do my update, Mommy, and we'll both get off together.
Okay.
Okay, so we had an update today on the prosecutor hit list fallout. And there was a white SUV with dark tinted windows showed up here outside of my house today that looked an awful lot like the prosecutor's ex-wife out here beeping her horn at my house. And then she sat out there for about a minute and then took off like a bat out of hell. So I guess we're gonna have to call the police or something. I don't know what we're gonna do about that, but I swear it just seems like the actions though that are being taken are just get more and more like they're just proving me right. You know, they're just proving me right with all of these things.
Well, you know, it is what it is, and it's to be expected.
All right. Well, you guys have a great rest of your night. Scorpio girl said, call Mickey.
Oh, that was funny.
Guys, well, you have a great rest of your night. Tomorrow, we're going to do a show on how to file a bar complaint. So that way we're going to go through and see what all the steps are that we have to take, because I think a whole lot of people would like to know, you know, what steps we're supposed to take for that kind of thing. So I don't know if we're going to do that. I don't know if we're going to do that one tomorrow or not, but I also want to do one on the forgetful grandmother, because she I just, that case has a real soft spot in my heart. I can relate to her, the grandmother. We found out that she had been on sleeping pills for 20 years plus or something. And 2 of her grandchildren had passed away in her care. And it's just, it should have been preventable. It was preventable. Both of those children losing their lives was preventable. And addiction. It's addiction. People who who may not live in an addicted family. You know, some people just are completely oblivious to what addiction is. It doesn't have to be, you know, smooting up and that kind of stuff. That's not what an addict is. You know, I mean, we have different extremes, of course, and you have different kinds of addictions. You know, I've said it many times, addiction is not a one size fits all treatment. So, but anyway, look forward to those. And before I go, Marnie, thank you, honey. She donated 20 memberships tonight, guys. So, and Miss Marie became a member. And I'm going to, real fast, I want to run down through and say thank you, Miss Lynn Foley from my Cash App, Wanda Davis, Janelle Lang, Tiffany Garrett, Shannon Burrells. I think I said that. If I said that wrong, I'm sorry. Kimberly Bailey, Veronica Sansom, Mark Kaiser. Thank you, Mark. Bless you, honey. Bless you. Patricia Mann, Paula Board, Tish Guledge, Candy Atchley, Lucy Martin, Donna Haynes, Tish Guledge, Brian Wedmore, Lisa Razsnake, Laura, Christy Fowler, Lois Thomas, Janice Scott, Tracy McClellan, Tiffany, Janice, Mary, Glenda, Veronica, Audrey, Holly, and Miss Carolyn, Diana. If I missed anybody, thank you so much for those. I just want to make sure that I tell everybody thank you, because I sure do appreciate it for everybody. Mary Ellen, thank you, honey. Marnie, Crystal, Haley, Tammy, Lee, and I think that's it for my Venmos. PayPal. Let's see. Connie, thank you, honey. Emily Thompson, Sheila Brennan. Thank you, guys. And Miss Julie, always. Thank you. All right, guys. We will see you tomorrow. All right. Have a great rest of your evening. Stay blessed. Stay warm. And stay dry, hopefully. Pray for all the people who are going through all these horrible weather issues. And keep me in your prayers. All right, y'all. See you tomorrow. Bye.
You can't hide from hillbilly crime.
You can't hide from hillbilly crime.
You can't hide from hillbilly crime.
You may not know that there's a crew in town. The head hillbillies are making their rounds. Small town whispers loud and clear. The sheriff shot the judge in his chambers chair.
Sheriff got a secret he won't keep. Judge shot dead in his disbelief. A lot of people have some stories to tell. Dark pass away, get the sound of a shotgun shell.
All the secrets spill on down. Voices loud in this old town. From the courthouse to the ground, rumors fly and they can't be bound.
Neighbors hide behind their blinds, whisper tales of troubled minds. Skeletons covering the mountainside, a treacherous reality in the pines.
Winter reveals the hidden lies. Moonlight couldn't mask the cries. Shadows caught in sunlit skies. There's no cover, no disguise. All the